Alright folks, so it's time to continue on this Amiga project that I started a while back. It's taken me time to source parts, so we've got at this stage we need to put this clock oscillator in, and I have some ICs to put. So we got the budgie here, Paula, Gail, Alice, Lisa, and hopefully by the end of this video we should see some sign of sync signal on video. We need to test the clock as well, that is working fine. So I've already put this in. I'm going to get the oscilloscope out and check that we are indeed getting a pulse on the clock, and then we'll have to put budgie in and test that we're getting a right clock signal at where is it? Some resistor. I'll find it again. Just following the guide that Chucky put in place for people to do their own. In the time it's taking me to just put those down, he's probably made 5 or 6. The man is a machine, and he's building this so fast. But I suppose he's used to it, and he has all the ICs on hand. He probably has a stock of everything. It's taken me time even, and a lot of money even, to source these. I don't have a spare board or spare board to scavenge them from, and I don't really have access to new old stock, so I had to source them from a few places on eBay and other places on the internet. And that's not even the entire set. I'm waiting to receive the CIA ICs processor. I'm probably doing this the hard way and the slow way, but yeah, it'll be a good benchmark to see how much it costs and how much effort goes into it for somebody like me who doesn't have all these parts on hand, because that's a consideration you need to keep in mind. Anyway, let's enough talking. Let's solder and measure stuff. Anyway, on the topic of measuring stuff, I have my old Amiga 500 power supply instead of the power supply for this guy, which as we found out, gives out weird readings when it's not under load. So I've just connected it, and indeed I'm reading all the correct voltages. You can read +5 on my +12 here, and -12 is somewhere else, and it's all reading fine. So that's good news so far. Alright, so I got my scope here set up. It's going to be interesting. I don't have a ton of space on this workbench anymore. And the point where you can measure this is right here. Right this, let me zoom in. This little point here, which Chuck is conveniently kept unmasked. So we're going to do that. So let's power it on, and it should ideally measure 20, where is it? There it is. And there you go. 28 megahertz. Thereabouts. Yeah, that's good enough. So that's just straight out of the oscillator. So now we need to put in budgie and remeasure the frequency, and we should have a fairly stable clock then. This video is sponsored by PCBWay. No, come on, let me do it. Come on. Anyway,
this is just ridiculous. I hate you.
PCBWay offers PCB manufacturing services, of course, along with part assembly, but they also offer a number of other fantastic services like CNC, metal sheet fabrication, 3D printing, and even injection molding. Essentially a one-stop service for all your projects. So go to PCBWay.com, upload your project files, and get an instant quote, and thank you to them for sponsoring this video. So I've just realized I've been talking to myself for the past 20 minutes, soldering this guy. I hadn't pressed play, but anyways, it's now in place. I've just cleaned as best as I could, and my last comment on these were about the amount of flux that's needed. It seems to be that in the flux community, whatever that is, the consensus is that too much flux is better than not enough, and it's probably better to clean a lot of excess afterwards than not having enough flux and damaging stuff. I see one trace here that probably has a bit too much solder, but I think you can live with that if it's not shorted. Giving this a last inspection as well with I have this magnifier, I have this lamp here which has a magnifier, and a pair of glasses. So I'm getting a good look at this now at this stage. But it seems to be okay. I've cleaned the flux as much as I can outside, So cool, that's my first SMD IC. Alright, so we got Budgie in, I got my oscilloscope. So this is the save waveform from directly from the oscillator here. And the oscillator goes in, it goes into pin 94, which is the third one from here. And pin 95 here is the output of that clock. So it gets buffered in Budgie and then it gets output on pin 95. So we can measure that on a resistor underneath the board. So I'm going to flip that over. Let's repower it. And here, E133, this guy here is where I want to measure my clock. So just superimposed on the save signal. There you go. Okay, so we got a clock out of Budgie. We can move on to soldering the other ICs. Those PLCC type of ICs are just a pain to solder. That took me forever, and I hated every single minute of it. I thought this was going to be the hardest because the pitch was smaller, but it's actually ended up being the easiest. The pins on these just go round under the chip, so it's actually hard to see if the solder has gone right under. So you end up having to, well, first I had to revert back to my round tip because the knife edge one that works so well for these just doesn't work really for that. And then you can't really, well, I couldn't really drag solder them. Even that, it kind of looks like the solder doesn't go under, but it does. And so I had to check afterwards, after cleaning. You need to check and double check first that there's no bridges that happens behind, because that can happen as well. So none of the pins are bridged, and then check for continuity to wherever that trace is going. So it's so tedious. And yeah, there's a few more, but they have less pins. So hopefully it'll be quicker. I don't anticipate that it will be now at this stage, having done these big trees. Didn't like doing those. So next we need to check that we have a sync signal. Normally we should get a sync signal with these ICs in. So I'm going to put I have the RGB connector that I'm going to use. I'm going to source as well a a VGA connector. It says no scan doubler, that's why scan popped in my head, but for now I use RGB. I'm going to try to make this as complete and versatile as possible. Use the RGB connector. We also need to populate a couple of extra things. So I believe this LSO8 here, I think that's the only one on the board. And then we have a shift register IC that we need to populate as well. Sometimes it's recommended. I see one here. I'm not sure if there's another one on the board. I'll double check which one it is. And those PNP transistors need to be populated as well to make sure that we get sync signal. We won't get a picture, but we'll get if it works correctly, and if my monitor picks up the signal. That has proven to be sometimes temperamental with a few arcade boards. Anyway, so hopefully it'll pick that up. What I'm expecting to happen is that we might get a change of color on the screen, but there's a prompt that tells you whenever SCART is connected. So I'm hoping that as soon as I power the Amiga, the SCART will be recognized as connected. If that doesn't happen, we can double check that we get a sync signal anyway. I'll have to figure out which one is a sync pin, or if I can tap it from somewhere else. We can look through an oscilloscope if we get a sync signal at all. So fingers crossed. Also, I want to mention, because people will ask me, this is the flux I'm using. This one was sent to me by Chucky. Thank you very much. That was very very generous. And yeah, it's been great. I mean, I have some flux, but for stuff like that, you really want a good solid product. So I was told this is the one to have. So there you go. Thank you very much, Chucky, for sending me that. Much appreciated. Something I should have mentioned as well while I was making these is where the pin one is. So on this guy, there's a little notch, and it should align with the one corner. But on these guys, you see this sort of a corner that has an extra line. It's not there. And if you look very carefully on these IC, this corner is actually sort of chiseled off, which is not the case here. Or here, or here. But this corner has a chisel. So you should align these with this. And to make things even more confusing, and I had to catch myself a few times. I was like, oh my God, did I align this properly? But yeah, so it's right here and right here on these two ICs, and it's here on this one. So just keep that in mind. You can see here, this corner on the CIA is here, but on the Paula it's up there. On this one it's over there. On this one it's over here. They're all sort of facing a different way. So just make sure you don't just align them with the text facing like down all the time, because then you're in for a treat having to desolder these. All right, so we got the LS08 here. Indeed, the shift register, the LS166 is here. And I'm not sure if it was just this and this transistor, but I actually put all three of them. We should get a signal on this pin for V-Sync, I think. On this pin for H-Sync. And this is C-Sync here, but we haven't done anything to the circuit, I think, to enable it. So I'm not sure we're getting anything on that pin. So anyway, let's just check horizontal sync, and there you go. Yeah, we get something, and V-Sync should be a lot slower. Yeah, it's actually, I haven't said anything to a triggering here, so it's having a hard time just finding a stable triggering. But yes, it's and H-Sync. Yeah, there you go. All right, so I think next we need to put the this guy in. Is at the keyboard MPU. Get the serial going, and I think we're going to need to putty into the serial. But we have a few more stuff to put in. This is one, the processor. So I have these on order, so I'm just waiting to receive them. But we'll do all this in this video. I've decided to put sockets here. So this here is the slot for the keyboard MPU, and also we need the low voltage detector and this 3 megahertz crystal here. I'm actually putting some insulation around it because I couldn't find a small form factor one, so I have a big one. Hopefully it won't get in the way of anything. I'm not sure, but if it does, it's not too big a job. It's a true old one, so it's not that bad to replace. I decided to use sockets here because I'm going to need one. We're going to need to do this PAL as well, and because it needs to be programmed, I want to put sockets on that. So I have the GAL or PAL, forget whichever is which. Here I need to program it, but I'm waiting for the sockets to arrive, and they're taking their sweet time to arrive. What I have though is a few of these sockets, so it needs another 2 here for the CIA chips and one for this guy here. So I'm gonna put one. I think next we need to put the odd CIA as well, so we get some visual when we do the serial tests. So I'm going to put a socket here. I'm actually put these sockets everywhere. Just be careful because as you can see, it has a bigger footprint than an IC normally, so they can take a bit more space. I'm also going to do a continuity test using the schematics to make sure that everything goes to everywhere. A lot of this goes into this pin out here anyway, and around that area. But I'm going to do the same as well for every single one. So it's going to take a bit of time. Like I said, I'm not entirely still familiar or confident with my surface mount soldering skills. So it's better to be careful and double check everything. So I'm just going to do continuity test, not on the solder patch, but on the pins here on the top to make sure that everything is fine. Next, we'll put the sockets here. As soon as I receive it, I'm going to put the socket here and program the that IC, and we should be ready to go. I have a serial connector here. I've got the GAL chip in. Chucky provides Let me just change this. Chucky provides the file that you can use to program this. You need just a standard the TL866, whatever it is, EEPROM programmer, and you get an adapter for these guys, and that will program it no problem. I've got the diagnostic ROMs populated right here. Got my sockets wherever I need them. Got the CIA here, the is it the even or odd? I forget which is which. So I think we're good to go for the next test. I put an extra LED here because we need that. So the next test is essentially, we're going to try and power this. What we should see is the LED flash, sort of like a guru. So it should flash slowly on and off. You know, that guru meditation kind of error that we get, which is essentially what's happening. But it's a good indication that we can progress on to the next phase. So if we see that, then we can continue with our build and not spend too much time error tracing. I did spend a lot of time, because this is my first build and because this is SMD stuff, I did spend a lot of time just double checking each of my solder points here and just make sure that they actually go to the right place. So it took a lot of time. I had the schematics down. I have the this power supply, which is one of those you find on eBay. More reliable really than the original power supply. Yeah, I'm happy with that, and it's on brand with this build. It's a new build, new modern kind of power supply ish. Anyway, let's power this on and see if we get that LED. Yeah, there you go, flashing. Yeah, slow enough. I think this is what we expect to see, so I'm happy with that. And I put a red LED beside the yellow here. Okay, so next we need to populate Paula. And I think, is it the 1489 or 1488? And we can start checking our diagnostic ROM. So we're going to have to, I've put the serial port connector here. We're going to use a serial to USB adapter, connect to a PC, and see the output from the diagnostic ROM through the serial port. Again, I mean, Chucky has spent the time to do a full guide for this. Do make sure you follow the guide. Do not be tempted to put like parts randomly or put everything and then figure it out afterwards. It's a recipe for disaster. I've seen so many of these type of builds, maybe not even as complex as that by any shot, but where people just didn't follow a step-by-step or didn't follow the recommendation process for building those, and they ended up with just a paperweight that they can't really diagnose. So just make sure you take your time, follow the guide, double check everything. Don't be too confident with your solder skills, and it should go fine. Oh yeah, and obviously the CPU is now in place. Right, next step on this, I've put the 1488, is that the one at this location? Can't remember. And I have a USB to serial adapter, and I didn't have an adapter for this guy, but I just use whatever connectors here to make a basic null modem. Anyway, so what should happen here is we are going to test that the ROMs are working. So I've made it's COM4 where the USB is. We're going to load PuTTY, and I'm going to use the serial to COM5, and I think that's all we need. Should open a window here, and I should, if I start this guy, I should, yes. So there you go. I think this is the output we should be getting. Well, it should be failing right now. It's trying to check the RAM, but we've no RAM in, so it's just failing on every RAM check. There you go. So it stops. It says no memory found, halting system. This is what we should be getting anyway. Fails on trying to write anything to RAM, really. I'm not sure though while this is passing. So maybe I'll check with Chucky or Terrible Fire that this is the exactly expected output when you have absolutely no RAM in. So I did ask Terrible Fire, and then I felt very silly afterwards because, of course, there's no RAM in, so all the address lines are going to be put high. So it's not actually showing you that the write was successful, but that the read was successful. So it's reading all highs, so 11111 FFFFF. So it's passing the test, reading all ones. That's expected when you've absolutely no RAM in place. Feel very silly. Anyway, folks, this is part 2 of this build. Tricky build, at least for me. I've never done anything on that scale when it comes to SMD soldering, so it's a learning curve. It's not an easy build. It's not a beginner's build. I'll have to say, some people might be able to do this in their sleep. Certainly, Chucky can do about 4 or 5 in 1 hour. I'm barely exaggerating here, but for somebody like me, it's a tricky one. But take it slow. Don't be tempted to solder everything. Just make sure you follow the guide. I can't stress this enough, and I'll repeat this in every video. Follow the guide to the letter. Take your time. Don't be tempted to put components randomly on the board as you get them. It's a recipe for disaster. And do all the tests one after the other, and stop whenever one test is failing, or if a test is failing, stop, fix that, and before you continue, you'll be happier in the long run. But there you go, folks. Part 2 of this build. Next, we are going to tackle the RAMs, and I think the part 3 is essentially just getting the RAMs to work together through the serial output, and maybe get some visual. We'll see. So yeah, there you go, folks. Thank you for watching. I hope this was interesting. It certainly is an interesting build for me. I've never done anything like that, and it's been a great learning curve. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. And I'll never do one of those ever again.